Hey guys, this is Dr. Michael Tancini from Ground Overhead Physical Therapy, and I just wanted to talk with you guys a little bit about running mechanics. So I've worked with a lot of runners in my practice. I see a lot of running related injuries, and a lot of those injuries come down to basically how somebody runs. So if we can improve someone's running mechanics, then we can help them stay out of pain and help them actually run faster in the process. So let's talk a little bit about it. So first, let's talk about the anatomy of the running stride. The three phases of the running stride: we have pose, we have fall, and we have pull. Okay, so if you look on the screen, pose, fall, pull. The pose position is when our center of mass is directly over top the ball of our foot. So we should have a relatively vertical line between the midfoot, the hip, the shoulder, and the ear. Okay, this is your pose position. This is the runner's position. How well you run is dictated by how well you can get out of the pose position and how efficiently you can get then back into the running or pose position. Next, we have the fall. Okay, so the fall is actually how we move forward when we run. Doesn't matter if we're sprinting or running Ironman, triathlon. It doesn't matter. We fall forward, which then allows us to move down the track and move down the road. Then after the fall, we have the pull. So this is when we pull our heel back underneath our hips, which then sends us back into that pose position. Okay. Now, what running mechanics and what the running stride is not. It is not lean as far forward as you can, reach as far forward as you can, and then push off as hard as you can. Okay. Those three things only lead to inefficient running, slower times, and it leads to pain. So let's look over to the left side of the screen here. We've got heel strike versus a midfoot strike, okay? Or the heel strike and the midfoot strike, two things that we actually don't want to see. We actually want to see a forefoot strike. So the heel strike is going to send a lot of forces back up through the chain, really affecting our knee, really affecting our hip, okay? On top of that, we're going to spend a lot longer time in stance when we strike with that heel strike. We're going to have a much more narrow base of a support, which is then going to lead to a lot of compensations up and down the chain, leading to pain. Okay, so let's move on. Falling forward, this may be a relatively new concept for you guys here. The fall forward is actually how we move down the track. So think back to your physics days. If you didn't take physics, I'm going to give you a crash course here. Okay, so look at Usain Bolt here in the first frame. He has a relatively vertical stance. Okay, that's the pose position. He's on the ball of his foot or on the midfoot. The hip and the shoulder are all stacked. Okay, in the next frame, okay, you can see he's beginning to fall forward. Okay, so he's beginning to fall forward, which is then helping him move down the track. In the next frame, he's even falling more. Okay, this is what makes Usain Bolt so fast. He has an incredible fall angle, and he's very efficient in getting that heel back up underneath the hips. You combine that with very long levers, and you have a very fast runner. So it's the torque around the axis. So we move forward and we fall forward by the torque around the axis, which is the foot. Okay. We have the foot, okay, and then we have gravity pulling straight down. And as our body falls forward, we get this torque about the axis, which is our foot. Okay, that torque is made up of two components. Okay, it's made of a vertical component, which is gravity, pulling straight down, and we have a horizontal component, okay? That horizontal vector is what is setting us down the track. So the longer or the greater our fall angle, the more force we're going to have going in the forward direction, the faster we're going to run. Okay, a little crash course on physics right there. Now, let's talk about the foot strike, because everyone talks about the foot strike at some point. Ideally, we want a forefoot strike. Okay, this is in the green box on the screen. Okay, this part of your foot is made very well to absorb force. It's very, very wide. It's very, very stable. Okay, we go back to the midfoot. Okay, there's a lot of confusion when you hear someone say, "Oh, I have a midfoot strike," or "I'm trying to have a midfoot strike." Well, the midfoot anatomically is actually the arch. Okay, so it's that area right there. We actually do not want to strike on the midfoot, as we don't want to strike with a flattened out arch. Now, there's been some research that uses the midfoot strike and defines it as when the forefoot and the rear foot hit at the same time, yet they're actually not striking on the midfoot as they would be striking on the arch of their foot. So, last we have the heel. Okay, the heel is very thin, very bony, and does not absorb force very well. This gets transmitted back up the chain. Okay, so a lot of the confusion about midfoot versus forefoot is based off of it's been defined different within the literature. Next, okay, let's look over to the left. So forefoot, this is the arch. That's the rear foot or the heel. All right. Look over here. Heel, we do not want to strike there. We want to strike here on the forefoot. All right. Now, let's look at Usain Bolt here. Okay. So once I start the video, it's going to play some pretty loud music. So just be ready for that, okay? But you're going to see Usain Bolt run in slow motion. You're going to see him strike with a forefoot strike. It's going to strike relatively directly underneath the center of mass, and he's going to be very efficient on getting that heel back underneath his hips, okay? So he's going to reach pose, he's going to fall forward, and then he's going to recover the heel back underneath the hips. So let's watch. Okay, it's really a thing of beauty. All right, so let's look at it in freeze frame now. So we look at his initial contact. Okay, so he has the forefoot striking relatively underneath his center of mass, a little bit out front, but he has a very small window here of where his trail leg is and his front foot. Okay, so striking relatively underneath the center of mass. We look at the next picture. That's the pose. So he has a relatively vertical orientation. Okay, we have the forefoot directly underneath the hips, directly underneath the shoulders. Go on to the next picture. Okay, and this is his fall forward. He's fallen forward around the axis, which is his foot. He isn't reaching out with that front leg. He then recovers his heel and pulls the heel quickly back underneath the hips. Next, okay, let's look at Moses. Okay, Moses is a long distance runner here, one of the best runners in the world. So we see him here at initial contact. He's striking with the forefoot. All right, relatively underneath the center of mass, a little bit out front, just like you saw Bolt do, but it's relatively underneath his center of mass. Next, okay, his pose position. So he has a relatively vertical orientation, midfoot, through the hip, through the shoulder, through the head. Okay. Next foot is his when his foot leaves the ground in the toe off phase of the gait cycle. You see he looks very similar to Bolt's. He has a fall forward. His midline isn't broken, and the front foot isn't reaching far out. Okay. Now, how we class, or how I would look at this if I was breaking down someone's running mechanics, is I would look at their frame count. We would figure out how long it takes them to get into pose, or from initial contact to pose, and then out of pose. Okay. Ideally, we want about a 2-to-2 ratio, so in to out. And when you're dealing with a camera that's set on 30 frames per second. And that's actually what these two guys are. They're extremely close to that 2-2, and only spend about 4 frames with their foot on the ground. The less time you spend on the ground, the less likely you have for injury. All right. So let's look at the common errors that I tend to see. I tend to see an overstride. So overstride, someone reaching as far out as they can, which normally ends up with a heel strike. We have 2 excessive push-offs, so someone who really tries to push off hard with their stance leg to drive them forward. The quad and the calf are actually not the things pushing us down the track. Remember, it's the fall and gravity moving us down. If the quad and the calf were the ones doing most of the work, you would see someone essentially go straight up and down, as that's what those 2 muscles are going to end up doing. Now, you're going to see a narrow base of support. This is something that I see with someone who has an overstride and excessively pushes off. This leads to essentially they get an overstride and they end up walking a tightrope, which then impairs their ability to stabilize laterally. So they get a lot of wobble through the hips and through the spine and through the knee. Someone with a slow cadence, okay, this is someone who just doesn't move their feet quick enough. They spend a lot of time on the ground, and it ends up causing them a lot of problems. Next, we have an active landing, so someone who's been told that they need to land on their forefoot or on their midfoot, and they're actively feeling for the ground, which normally ends up looking like they're prancing as they run down the road. The next is excessive trunk lean, so someone not falling forward. So this would be falling forward, so foot and all the way up the chain. Then this would be a trunk lean, so foot, hips broken, and their center of mass is still lagging back instead of falling forward to help them move down the track. All right, so how do these things normally present when I see them in the clinic? Foot pronation is huge. Okay, so this is when your arch collapses down. We see a lot of dynamic knee valgus, so this is when the knee collapses inward, and you find the knee inside the hips, okay, and the knee inside of the foot, okay. So if you're, then we can look at pelvic drop, okay. So the opposite hip, so the swing hip is at a lower point than the stance hip. So if you're looking at someone from the front or the back, this is your stance leg. You would see your swing leg hip be lower than the stance leg hip, okay? Next, okay, so these presentations normally present with these kind of injuries. So plantar fasciitis, huge one. Achilles tendinopathy, patellofemoral pain syndrome, patellar tendinitis or tendinopathy, IT band syndrome is a big one. Hip impingement. This is the tightness you might feel right in the front of the hips. Piriformis syndrome and low back pain. So you correct your running mechanics, you can take care of a lot of these issues. Next, we need to talk about cadence. Okay, I mentioned a slow cadence a little bit earlier in the presentation, but a slow cadence can essentially forces us to spend more time on the ground and increases our chance for injury. Now, our cadence, we want to be above 180 steps per minute. With this cadence, we spend a lot less time on the ground. Okay, it's automatically going to help you shorten your stride because you're spending less time on the ground, which is then going to encourage more of a forefoot strike instead of a heel strike. Because you're spending less time on the ground and you're not reaching as far forward, it's going to help you widen your base, increasing the lateral stabilization when you run, stability when you run. And it's also going to help you utilize the elastic properties of your muscles and tendons better. Okay, this is going to decrease your oxygen consumption, which essentially means you don't get tired as quickly, and you're a more efficient runner. So, some focus points that you can take into your next run. 1, cadence. Increase your cadence. Go to the App Store, get a metronome app, set it to 180 beats per minute, and I want you to think about pulling your heel off the ground as quickly as you can on every beep. Okay? And don't think of your foot hitting the ground with every beep. Think about your foot coming off the ground with every beep. Okay, this will really cue you to think about quick pulls off the ground and help you spend less time on the ground. Okay. Next, pull. Okay, so you really need to think about pulling the heel directly underneath the hips with every stride. Okay, so pull, not push. You want to pull. Now, remember, to move faster, then we fall forward. Okay, so think about your fall. It isn't a trunk lean; it's a fall. So think of your fall as the gas pedal. You want to run faster, you fall more. You want to run slower, you fall less. Okay. Now, if you're someone who has pain when they run, or immediately after you run that you think is due to your running. So this could be knee pain, hip pain, back pain, Achilles pain, plantar fascia pain, etc. I'm going to recommend try the focus points on the previous slide. Okay, and look through some of my videos on my YouTube channel to practice some of the fundamental drills needed for running properly. Okay. Next, if you're a little bit confused on the running mechanics, you're not sure what you actually do, because actually knowing what we're doing when we're running is actually really tough if we've never been shown what we do. Many people are asked what part of the foot they strike on, and they might say, oh, I'm a mid-foot, forefoot striker, and they're actually a heel striker. Okay, so you really don't know until you see yourself on camera. So I always recommend a video running analysis to anyone who wants to improve their running, stay out of pain, and actually improve their pain and decrease their pain that they're currently having. Now, this is something that I do in my practice. Essentially, if you're locally, I have you come to the clinic and we do a 3D video running analysis. If you are not local to me, I do a remote video analysis. You send me a video and I break it down for you, and then we chat about what's going on, why it's happening, and then I provide you drills and focus points to help you improve your running. Okay, so here's my contact info. You can find me on Instagram and Facebook. I post a lot of things to Instagram about how to take care of your body and actually in the different running drills. Facebook, my website, you can check that out. If you guys want to get in touch with me, shoot me an email, comment under this video, or you can give me a call. Okay. Okay, guys, here we go. I just want to do a quick video analysis for you. This is for an athlete that I'm currently working with. She's a functional fitness athlete who is currently training for a triathlon. She historically hates running. She isn't a very fast runner. She isn't a very good runner. Every time she runs, she gets really bad right knee pain. So she avoids running, and and the pain actually prevents her from practicing her running more than she already does, which is very, very minimally. Let's look at the way she runs, and let's break her down for you. All right. So we watch her run in slow motion. As you can see, this looks drastically different than Usain Bolt did. Okay. All right. If you need a reference, go on back to earlier in the video and look at Usain Bolt run back in the presentation. Okay. Now, here we go. The first thing we see is a very bad heel strike there. Okay. She gets the heel strike, causing a jolting force back up through the chain, putting a lot of stress on her right knee. I'm also going to note that she's also had hip pain in the past. Hip pain from running. You can see the jolt goes back up through the limb, through the knee, puts a lot of stress on the knee, a lot of stress on that hip. She also has a very long stride. What you can't see from this angle is she actually runs with a very, very narrow base. She gets a lot of foot pronation and a lot of dynamic valgus at the knee. I'm just showing you guys a side video for this, but I actually looked at her from the back as well. Now, she has, okay, so heel strike, putting a lot of forces back up through the knee, through the hip. Next thing we note is that she has a very wide window. A very, very wide window. This essentially signifies that she's reaching out front and her trail leg is trailing behind. And someone who's a very efficient runner, who's able to get their heel back up underneath their hips very, very quickly and very, very efficiently, is going to have a very small window. So that's one of the ways we can look at somebody and note their improvements at initial contact. Now, Usain Bolt had a very small window. I pointed this out to you guys a little bit earlier in the presentation. He is an amazing runner. So as we go through, okay, so we have heel strike. We take her into the pose, okay. So we take her into pose. She has a relatively vertical position, okay. So through the midfoot, through the hip, through the shoulder, she's in a pretty good position. Maybe a little bit more forward than we actually want. But this isn't the worst of her problems, okay? So the pose position will iron itself out with a little bit of drill work. And actually improving the other parts is going to help to improve that pose position. Now we take her through. If you can see, let's take her all the way to push off, to where she's actively, you can see her, she's actively trying to push herself forward. As she pushes herself forward, she's reaching hard with that other foot. You can see they're really reaching out, trying to get as long as she can. Which is actually, if you can see in the video, she actually moves vertically quite a bit. That's something you'll see with someone who has an excessive push-off. And she then heel strikes with the opposite side. Not quite as bad, but does. And you can see that back heel is very laggy with getting back underneath the hips. Okay. Now, I also watched this individual run off the treadmill, and her heel strike was actually worse. Everything looked pretty much the same as the treadmill. Her heel strike actually was significantly worse on that right side as she was running on the track. So, okay, there you go, guys. So, major things here: heel strike, reaching out. That back foot is lagging, so she has a delayed pull back underneath the hips. From other angles, we saw that her foot was pronating. We saw a little bit of a dynamic valgus at the knee. And we saw that she ran with a very narrow base. All of these things then accumulating into her knee pain and knee problems. So, what are we going to fix? We're going to try and get her to increase her cadence. Okay, so we're going to get her running on a metronome, get her cadence at or above 180 steps per minute, and we're going to really cue her to pull the heel quickly underneath the hips. Okay, and as soon as that foot hits the ground, try and get it up, off immediately, and back underneath the hips. Okay, we're not going to have her focus on her foot. We're not going to have her focus on her stride length. We're not going to have her focus on her strike position. We're simply going to have her focus on increasing the cadence, learning how to fall forwards. Okay, fall forwards better to drive herself forward, and get that heel back underneath her hips as quick as possible. With these three things, in this athlete's case, we're going to see all the other issues iron themselves out, and she's going to do great in her try. She's going to run much faster, and she's not going to have knee pain while she does it. So there you go, guys. That's a little demo for what a running analysis might be like. With this athlete, we then went and worked on drills, and she works on practicing this on a regular basis now. So, but okay, all right, there you go. If you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out, send me a message, comment under the video, or contact me via social media, via email, whatever's easiest for you guys, and I'll be happy to help you guys out. Okay, so I hope that helped. I hope you guys are able to take away some key points from the video today, and happy running. Have a great day.